we hack the code and flip the tag. Where cliches come to retire. Drop that beat, turn down to fire. Say what's real, make fears take a seat. Unconventional wisdom, dancing on your feet. Hey.
Hello and welcome to Unconventional Wisdom about conventional wisdom. You are in for such a treat today. So I'm Kim Miller-Hershon. I'm your host, but I think more importantly, my guest today is Vivic and Eranki, and I'm actually going to let him introduce himself, but you are really in for a treat. Okay.
Hi, Kim. Thank you very much for having me on. My name is Vivek. I live in Australia. I started my life off as a doctor, so a medical doctor, specializing in everything from family health to medical administration to surgical, specifically cosmetic surgery. But about 10 years ago, I transitioned from a clinical role into a purely business role. We've opened, scaled, and successfully exited out of multiple businesses. And the business that we currently have and that we're currently scaling is a chain of cosmetic clinics. We have 20 around the country. And it keeps me on my feet. And it's absolutely enjoy the change that I've made about 10 years ago.
Which, in and of itself, like, I think it's pretty amazing as a medical doctor that you are so good at business, right? Because I think there's a lot of doctors who are really good at medicine, but they're not necessarily good at the business side.
People say that they're similar, but I would say that organically they're different. The thing about medicine is you cannot take risks because you're dealing with people. The thing about business, and I don't mean the forward-facing part of the business, but mainly behind the scenes, risk is rewarded. So this is a mind shift that would happen when a clinician goes from a clinical role into a business role. However, being in medicine, especially of my generation, we've been instilled some habits that are very advantageous in business. So I was from the last generation of doctors in Australia, where it was completely normal to work from a Friday morning to Monday evening without a wink of sleep. And once you do that again and again, it toughens you up. And again, I'm sure, Kim, you understand what I mean by this. In business, when everything is good, you can relax. It gives you that freedom. But when you need to go full hands on deck, you absolutely need that grit to get in and solve whatever problem arises. And that's another thing that medicine teaches you, especially being in surgery. You just don't know what the next step is going to be. And being comfortable with the unpredictable is something that is quintessential in business as well.
Oh, I love that comparison. That's great. There's so many things right there for us to pick apart. But before we get there, we need your random question, which is, would you rather live 1 week in the past or 1 week in the future?
That's actually a very good question. I would have to say that I would want to live 1 week in the future. And the reason for that is that I would be tempted to go with 1 week in the past from a comfort position because it enables you to play the perfect game again and again. But what I've realized is perfection, in a way, is the enemy of growth. So if you are never challenged, if you're not occasionally defeated, you will not get those learning lessons that'll help you grow and grow. And hence, for that reason, I will have to remove the 1 week in the past out of the equation, and hence I'd want to live 1 week in the future. And who doesn't want to know what the next iPhone is? There you go. So 1 week in the future is the answer. Yep.
Yeah. And I really like where you're going with this. And I think I would agree with you, just like personally. What it makes me think about is, for instance, AI right now is just in its infancy, and machine learning has actually been around for quite a long time. But I think as consumers, as regular people, I think we are just scratching the surface of what that is going to look like. And I would be fascinated to know what that future is going to look like. We might be in the
Oh,
Flintstones.
absolutely. Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Oh, I
I
said
think
Flintstones, but I meant Jetsons.
yes, Yep. I know what you mean. Yep. And you said that you live in San Francisco, and San Francisco is pretty much the epicenter of everything tech in the world, actually. So whatever you guys experience would be far ahead of what we have up here. But we can see the effect of AI on a day by day basis. I think on a realistic level, I think AI has incredible influence in marketing. So I've seen more and more ads become AI ads that rather than having people run the ads, it's actually you can tell that it's an AI generated ad. And some people hate it. Some people say, well, it's not natural, it's not genuine. But I think it's actually not a bad thing because you can program the outcome exactly in a way that resonates with the emotions of your customers. And no one's going to remember who the actor is, but they're going to remember how they feel when they've seen the ad. And I think from that perspective, AI is incredible. The other area that we found AI to be very effective is when it comes to voice synthesis. In Australia, for example, we have a very culturally diverse population. So AI has been incredibly useful in us communicating everything from our message to even the basic consenting process of medical treatments from English to other
Mm,
languages. It's been a game changer for us from that perspective.
yeah. And I even think about, I am super dating myself right now, but when I was growing up, we didn't have microwave ovens. If you wanted, and it was a TV dinner, right? You bought it in the freezer section and it was in a tin foil like tray and you put it in the oven for 45
Yeah,
minutes, right?
correct, correct, exactly. Yep.
And now, like, we cannot imagine a world without a microwave, right? Then I just think about what just doesn't exist now that is
Yeah,
going
exactly.
to exist in the future. And I would be very excited to see that.
I think Steve Jobs mentioned that computers have to be thought of as a bicycle for human beings or the human mind. I think we are looking at the computers being the bicycle and AI being the transition from the bicycle to the car. I think that's what it is. So I've seen both good and bad come out of AI. So when I say bad, I don't mean like bad, nuclear war bad. But what I mean by bad is it essentially amplifies the person, right? So if you have somebody who's innately lazy, you can see that they've drafted an email using AI without having considered the previous email, without having considered the real situation. So they've
Right.
just gone, AI, respond to my email. So it amplifies their laziness. But on the same token, I've seen AI being used very effectively in computer programming. So a very skilled programmer can actually look at the whole code base and ask AI to consider the entirety of the code base and then suggest any changes that needs to be made to the upcoming update so that it doesn't crash. So it really amplifies who the person is rather than replacing the person. And that's where I see AI having a massive effect. The other thing that I've noticed about AI, which we've never seen in the past, is if you look at all the previous revolutions we've had, the Industrial Revolution, etc., they've really affected the people that work with their hands. So they affected the laborers, they've affected the people that build various, everything from ships to cars to everything. Whereas AI is going to have almost no effect in that sector. You cannot replace a human being working with their hands, but you can augment a human being using their brain. It's going to be interesting to see what happens, actually. It's going to be very interesting to see what happens. Will the demand on tradespeople go up? Perhaps. And in a similar way, would the demand on white collar workers go down? Maybe. It's going to be interesting.
I would agree. All
Mm.
right. And you touched on a little bit of this in your intro, but where I want to direct the conversation now is what's one piece of conventional business wisdom that you followed early on that you later found out just was not right for you?
I would have to say that if you speak to marketing companies, if you speak to suppliers, they usually say, especially in our industry, they usually say something on the lines of, this is a new big cool thing coming out. Therefore, you guys have to carry it because all these other clinics seem to be interested in it. Conventionally, that makes sense because you know what, here's a brand new product, it gives you this marketing leverage, it gives you a differentiation. But what we found in the healthcare sector, and there's been a graveyard of examples here, is that anything that's new, anything that is shiny may actually cause patient harm. And what we do is we took the approach of saying that's nice, but we're going to take a step back, we're going to let the others be the first adapters. And if it works, we'll come in. If it doesn't work, we don't have any risk. And that's consistently reaped rewards. There's been so many medical devices that have come out in the last 10 years that we've gone, no, thank you to. And a lot of other clinicians have gone, yep, that is a fantastic idea. And they've ended themselves up in class action lawsuits, litigations, patient complaints, patient harm, the whole works. And these are all bullets that we dodged simply by saying new is not always better until somebody else tries it and provides us feedback.
That's so funny. You sound like a doctor when you, which you are, and that's good, right? But I think that it's also too, I think you're getting at as well, making your own evaluation of things,
Mm,
collecting data. And I do think that there is something about being very careful about how you make a decision. And then once
mhm,
you make the decision, man, you can just go. But
mm.
being thoughtful about doing it and getting the data sounds like actually a good piece of advice.
Yep. And funny enough, there's so many examples of that as well. BYD, which is a Chinese car company, is a perfect example of that. They watched how Tesla does it. They watched what works, what doesn't work. Where do they price their cars? How do they manufacture their cars? How do they make it efficiently? And in a few years, BYD has gone from a no name to the biggest car manufacturer in the world. And they've built gigafactories significantly bigger than Tesla. And sometimes just taking a step back and evaluating the landscape before you jump in is a good thing.
Yeah, I think that there's a lot of wisdom in that. So listen, 20 clinics, right? Like you were a successful doctor, and that's a very significant piece of business. What is one thing that people assume that you've got figured out that you still wrestle with inside?
I would have to say it is balancing optimism with realism, right? So, being in business, you have to be an optimist. You have to say, hang on, here's an opportunity in front of me, here's a person in front of me. Are they going to surprise me? Are they going to do the right thing? Sometimes they don't. And what I've learned is you can't pattern recognize. So, some of the most horrible interviews that I've seen ended up being some of the best hires, and vice versa. So what I've learned is hire fast and fire faster. If you found that there's somebody who is not acting in the customer's best interest, who's not doing the right thing by the patients, get rid of them quickly. But on the same token, when you're hiring, just never look at their CV or their interview as definitive, but rather just as a way to preclude somebody who has red flags, but not include somebody who you think is fantastic.
And I would agree in terms of hiring. I think that's one of the places where I think too much reliance on AI can
Mm,
really actually cause more problems. But I like the fire faster, hire
mm,
fast, fire faster. My husband has this saying that remember him saying this, I think almost from the time that I knew him, which is how it starts is usually how it goes,
mm.
right? So thinking that somehow somebody is going to be different, right? Now, it doesn't preclude the fact that you need a good onboarding process, that you
Mm.
need training and all those things. But if it starts out bad, it's probably going to be bad.
Yeah, the counter argument to that is I've seen a couple of people, right? When they hit the job running, they're fantastic. They pick things up really quickly. But for whatever reason, in the interview process, they're very anxious. So
Yeah,
what happens is with these people, they don't perform well in the regimented interview processes where
right,
you say, you have 15 minutes, impress me. They don't do
right.
well. So you have to think of them as a puzzle. You have to take a step back. And the question that I ask that disarms most people is, walk me through your life story, the decisions you've made, the training you've had, the jobs you've held, and how did that change the tapestry of your life? And what I find is the way that people approach it is the way they solve a problem. You can easily pick out somebody who has a sort of a victim mindset who go, oh yeah, no, I went to that job and yeah, they were crap. Oh, I went to the job and the aircon was too cold. Whereas there are other people that basically see a problem and solve a problem. And those are the
Right.
people that I want to catch. And that's how I like to approach HR.
I love that. And I do agree with you. When I say how it starts is how it goes, what I would say is that an interview is a contrived situation.
Yeah, it is.
And so I would agree with you if you have a good feeling about somebody, even if, listen, you can always teach the technical things.
Correct.
You can't teach a culture fit. You can't teach motivation, hard work, problem solving, right? Like those just internal motivators. So I think that's what I mean by that. But it is also interesting, right? Because I think different generations have different definitions of some of these things, right? What hard work looks like to
Mm,
one generation can look very different to another generation. And I think being judgy about those things also typically doesn't serve you or can
mm,
weed out people who would have been fabulous, right? If you just have a very
absolutely.
narrow definition of what you're looking for.
Absolutely. Do you guys hire a lot of millennials and a lot of the younger generations? And how do you find that works with the older generations and how they approach it? Because they're polar opposites, right? They are the
Yeah.
baby boomers and generations to 20 years from there or 10 years from there. They tend to work hard. They have a degree of pride in their work. Whereas the younger generations are more creative, they have more energy, but they are just, I would say, sometimes flakier as well. The littlest thing triggers them. What do you guys do in that area?
Vivic, what I can say is thank goodness, because that's what keeps me in business.
Yep.
Here's though, I think what the approach that I often take with these things is that oftentimes there's a communication issue. And what I mean by that is that you work a certain way. You think, okay, a boomer or a Gen X, right? You have the same work ethic, you work the same way. Hard work often looks the same. You
Mhm.
have expectations about hiring somebody. You don't actually
Mm,
really know upfront that these are the expectations that you have. But when a younger person doesn't meet those,
mm,
then it becomes very apparent that you really have a very different way of looking at things. What I would say is, shame on you for not being really clear about what your expectations are.
yeah. Yeah. No, I agree with that. Communicating, well, I found candor is very effective. So from the get-go, just telling somebody, listen, welcome to the job. This is what's expected of you. This is what you'll be accountable for. This is how people will be approaching you. And this is how success looks like. The second you tell somebody what that is, if they work within the framework, fantastic. If they find that that doesn't work for them, fantastic as well. I completely
Right.
agree with that.
You said, I think, really the magic words, which is here's what success looks like. In this
Mm,
role, this is what success looks like. And I would also take it one step further. This is the mission vision of the organization, and here's how you fit into that.
yeah, I like that. Yep.
And when you get alignment on those things, some of the ways in which people work can, just depending on what their role is, right? There can be a little bit more flexibility about what that looks like and how they do it. If they're meeting their outcomes, right?
Hmm.
Now, you have clinics, so you can't, some of it is just regimented, right? And
Oh,
it's,
yeah. No, there's no ifs, ands, or buts about that. That is
yeah,
black.
you
Yeah.
can't make it up. You can't make it up on your own, right?
No, no, it's very regulated. Yeah.
But in your corporate organization, how the marketing works or how somebody does some of those back end things can look different depending. But yeah, so I really like that, what success looks like. Do you know how many people don't tell somebody what success looks like?
Oh, it's in everyone's interest to tell people what success looks like, simply because that is the reason you're hiring somebody, right? You're hiring them not to meet a certain quota or to improve the employment rate for your country. You're hiring them because they have a job and you want them to succeed in the job. And really, they want to succeed in the job as well, because if they do, then their career progresses. They're going to have a better time.
Right.
It'll be rewarding for them, and yeah, so it's a win-win. Communication in this
Right.
aspect is an absolute, yeah, necessity, I would say.
Yeah, I love that. All right. So if you could rewrite the rule book on leadership, What's one outdated belief that you would throw away and what would you replace it with?
I think this is controversial, but I think it was Napoleon that basically said that sometimes a leader has to step back and has to be scarce so that when they present themselves, everyone behaves themselves. I think that's a very outdated, I can't remember the exact wording that he basically said, but words to the effect of if you're always there, no one listens to you. I found that to be completely outdated. I would find myself being the most approachable person in the company. If there's a problem, my answer is try and fix it. If you can't call me, I'm available 24/7. And as a leader, you have to be there with your troops. So I remember there
Mhm.
was a massive software update we were pushing out last week, and the programming team ran into some issues. And this is on the Friday. And I was there with them on the Friday night through to Saturday, helping them fix it. And I don't need to be, I could just be at home watching movies, but I think that I have a duty to support the staff who are supporting you. So I think a good leader is one that has to roll up their sleeves and would be comfortable getting in the weeds, sorting out a problem.
Sure. And it's such a delicate dance, right?
It
So,
is, yeah.
because you don't want to micromanage. And I think the other interesting piece of this, which it's so funny because I just had a coaching session, which is where's your highest value in the org?
Mm,
And how do you clear your calendar to not do so many tactical things, which is not what you're talking about. They ran into an issue, it
mm,
was a huge update. So that's not really what I'm talking about. But on a daily basis, right? How do you actually lead versus doing a lot of tactical things that really don't serve anybody because it keeps you away from doing the bigger things that nobody else can do?
I completely agree with that. And the problem there is the line between the problem solving of a major issue versus micromanagement is so fine that you always have to keep that at the back of your mind. You want to micromanage somebody, but you want to show everyone that you are there when there's a real problem and that you're not an absentee leader. And that's something that is always front and center. But putting emergency situations aside, I think that leadership is most effective when it's led by a mission. So, for example,
Mm.
on the cosmetic sector side, we pride ourselves in being the most safest, most compliant clinic in Australia, whilst at the same time being as affordable as possible. So we have a price beat guarantee. We use buy now, pay later options for all our patients. So we want to look after our patients both financially and both from a safety and compliance perspective. So every decision that every person makes is led by that core mission. Is it safe? Yes. Is it compliant? Yes. Are we bringing exceptional value both financially and medically for our customers? Yes. So that's how we approach
Mhm.
that. If you don't know what the company stands for, then if you as a leader don't know that, then your employees and your staff and everyone else would know that as well.
Right.
And that's how I see leadership being effective is that you have to be the torchbearer for this mission.
That's right. 100%. And just being so clear about it is so helpful. Clear and repetitive, right? Because everybody needs a North Star in the org to make decisions, right? Are these in alignment with our mission? And I think it's just very helpful to be very clear, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. And well, yeah, there's really just no substitute for it.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you're dead right in calling it a North Star because you have to be the person that points everyone in the right direction.
That's right. Yeah. Oh, love that. All right. What's one unconventional habit or mindset shift that's helped you grow your business?
I wouldn't call it unconventional, but in the healthcare sector, it is unconventional because if I speak to other business owners in the healthcare sector, not all of them, but some of them, or if I speak with clinicians who transition to business, they tend to go with the feel good. What I find is it's always better to go with data driven. And that sort of leads me back to the previous point that I raised about it's best not to jump on the new shiny thing, is because you are making a decision based on how it feels rather than what the cold hard data says. And I would say that more often than not in the healthcare sector, the best way to approach something is taking a step back, looking at the data, and then jumping into it. And data could mean everything from patient outcomes, financial outcomes, projections, all of that. And a perfect example is the other day. So, cosmetic clinics specialize in Botox and fillers. And don't know much about that, but Botox stops an area from moving, and fillers essentially add volume to an area. There was this exceptional brand in Australia, and their fillers were very good. They're well priced, they work well, they last a long time. So good for the customers, good for the clinic. But when I asked them the magic question, listen, we do about 3,000 treatments a month. Can you supply us? And there was crickets. And rather than I knew that this isn't going to work, it's important to jump into it with the entirety of the data rather than what feels good. So what would have felt good is to say, let me bring some of this fillers in and see how it works out. But then that's going to cause a lot of angst amongst staff as well as patients because, well, then if you have something and then if you have another thing and if you're saying this is better than this and then you say you ran out of this, then are you giving me something worse is the question. So yeah,
Right.
it opens a can of worms.
Right. You bring up a really interesting question. I don't know, listener, I don't know if you have this experience, but I will tell you what sometimes happens to me is that sometimes I think of a question and I don't ask it. For whatever reason, like I know myself and I know I have this incredible need to please. Right. So sometimes I will edit myself. And it's actually something that
Mm.
personally I've been working on a lot, which is to ask all the questions that come to my mind and not worry about what the other person thinks of me for asking the questions. Right. It's such a great question, just for all the reasons you just said. If we choose this, can you supply us? The answer to that is no, then there's a pretty obvious right direction to go with your business. So I do really like that. And I will say that I'm doing better on that myself. I'm working on it. I'm definitely working on it.
Kim, that's a very interesting thing that you mentioned because I think the answer to that is cultural, right? So if you look at the different cultures in the world, if you look at the Eastern Europeans and the Russians, what you find that they are blunt, they get
Yeah.
straight to the point, and they don't do that because they're mean people or they are unpolished. They do that because they view that as sincere. Now, if you look at Western Europe, Australia, America, Canada, these countries, what you find is people are very shy about asking questions that they perceive the other person may take offense to. So when I went to Germany, I went to Georgia, I went to a lot of the Eastern European countries. And what I found is when you ask those blunt questions, but in a polite, professional manner, people don't take offense to it. You get the
Right.
answers that you want. And that in itself leads to less conflict down the line. So that's what I found. I think it's better to ask the questions early on than deal with the consequences of not asking those questions later on.
I think I had a question recently, like a tax question. And that can be very churny, right? It can be very, right? You don't know, did I make a mistake here? Am I okay? And so those questions can be, for me, sometimes hard to ask. But the reality is, it's much better to know up front, like if you've made a mistake on something or not, instead of just waiting to see. And by the way, I did not make a mistake. Just FYI. But I think having the question, not asking it, and then having just that low level anxiety in the back of your mind, is this going to come
Mhm.
back to haunt me? That's not a good methodology.
And also accountants who are who essentially have all the knowledge in the taxation sector, I find that they're not the easiest people to deal with. They are very dry to deal with. And you can't ask them subtle questions. I don't know, it's just probably me without them trying to judge you. And the best way that I ask those questions, and trust me, I deal a lot with accountants, and FYI, I've never had any issues with taxation either. I love the tax office, they're fantastic. But the best way that I find to ask those questions is to say, listen, I don't want to pay a single cent of tax more than I have to. I don't like the government so much that I want to donate money to them. So, with that in mind, what do you think about this? Is that illegal? And asking them a black and white question
Yeah.
with them understanding what your perspective is. And then they will, like an AI bot, give you an answer that is very binary.
That's very true. Yeah, and on a different issue, I asked my accountant the question. And it's funny because it's about, so I'm publishing a book next year, and the publisher said to me, "Oh, maybe you need this kind of entity to keep it separate, whatever, right?" What's and then I'm like swirling on and I'm thinking about it. I call up my CPA and I just say to him, "This is the circumstance. Should I do this or that?" And like, like in 2 minutes, he's, "No, you don't need another entity. You just do it this way, right? Boom, done."
Yeah,
I'm like, okay, that's a lesson. Like, don't try to figure it out on your own when you have a
correct.
professional that you pay who knows the answer, right?
Correct. Correct.
Yeah. Yeah. Save a lot of
Correct.
time.
Exactly. I mean, in Australia, when people open up additional entities, they do so not from a taxation perspective, but from a legal protection perspective. Australia's actually recently tipped you guys and has become the most litigious society in the Western
Oh,
world. So
excellent.
we are number one now. So, which is why creating entities in order to protect yourself is the
Right.
reason why people do it now. It's not to do with tax. But yeah, approaching them from a black and white perspective is always the best way to deal with it.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah. All right. Last question. It's a two-parter. And it's about imposter syndrome. So, what I'm talking about here is if self doubt or when self doubt is going to come up for you or a lack of confidence, what is the circumstance that is potentially going to trigger you? And if it does, how do you get yourself back to neutral?
What I've learned is even beyond imposter syndrome, what I've learned is to be comfortable with the uncomfortable, right? So being in business, you are dealing with the uncertain every day. And reverting back to your random question, would I live 1 week in the past or 1 week in the future? If you've been in business for 10 years, you pretty much come across every combination permutation that, not in the exact sense, but in a generic sense of most problems that can come. And you've either learned lessons or you've succeeded. So because of that, you've got this confidence in yourself that if you're going to jump into something, that chances are that you haven't had it all figured out, but you will have it figured out as you go along, and you are nimble enough to make decisions as you go along. So with the imposter syndrome, at the start, I was concerned about it, but after a while, it's not something that does weigh in on me as much, simply because I understand that even if it's something that I researched to the nth degree, there will be something that I haven't. And you have to learn to deal with the unknown rather than try and make everything the known.
Right. I think that is such a I think that's such good advice. And in fact, I'm going to look here at my bookshelf because let's see, I don't know if I can put my eyes on it, but there's a book called Feel the Fear and Do It
Mm-hmm.
Anyway. And I think that there is so much like wisdom in that, right? If you're looking for total certainty in everything, like you'll
Yeah.
just be paralyzed, right?
Oh, correct.
The gray area, I think, relative to what you've talked about today is you want to do your research, you want to get as enough data as you can. There, though, has to be some cutoff where you
Oh,
make a
yeah.
decision. And I think, analysis paralysis, right? There's a lot of people who can't get past it, right? They're never going to get enough data to make a decision. Or, you know what? Listen, that is a decision, right? Your decision is I'm
Mm-hmm.
not going to make
The
one.
first approach that you take is, if you get an idea about something, the first question is it legal? If the answer is no, then let it go right there and then, right? Yes, it's legal. The second question is there an upside? And the answer is, if the answer is no, then well, then there's no point wasting time or
That's
money
right.
on it. Then the third question that I usually ask is, and this is Jeff Bezos so eloquently put it, is it a one-way street or a two-way street? If it's a one-way street in that you go down this path, but you can't come back, or it's very expensive to reverse the decision, then put a lot more thought behind it. But if it's a two-way street in that you make a mistake, you can quickly click undo and then redeploy, then fantastic. You've got nothing to lose. It's not illegal. It does have a financial upside. And if you make a mistake, you're not going to lose your shirt over it. Fantastic. Give it a shot.
Oh my gosh. You know what? I got mic drop. I think that is, I have nothing to say. It's so fabulous that I think this is just like the perfect thing to end our conversation on. I really like the way that you're approaching things. I think it's really solid, and I think that's just great advice. So there you go. You have spent a delightful time, I know, with Vivic and with me at Unconventional Wisdom about conventional wisdom. All the things that you need to do now, you need to share it, you need to review, you need to have conversations about it, and hopefully take some of this in and take some action, because that would be a good thing too. Go out there and be a better human.
Where cliches come